Good afternoon and early evening. My name is John Forry. I'm a member of GPSLA. We're going to be covering two important areas tonight. One is some of the key provisions of the Tax Reform Act of 2025, and another part of that, the international impact and very significant uncertainty which is going on surrounding that act. And then the second part, we will be talking with Michael Alberts, who is in charge of our LinkedIn and related marketing. And he's going to be talking with us about some procedures we're putting in force as we are beginning to attract significant amounts of day-to-day referrals into GPSLA, and we need to be able to handle those in an orderly way. So I'm asking Layla if she will grab the screen and put up this short. Okay, so this is a short summary of some of the key provisions. And basically, we had a preview of this, believe it or not, back in April of 2024, when a lot of these things were first coming up and couldn't be agreed upon. But eventually, of course, we came down to this past spring when reconciliation was adopted by the Republican majority, and they succeeded in getting most of the provisions of this bill okayed by the Senate parliamentarian as qualified for reconciliation. So it was passed. That's great. That looks even better. What we've got here is a short list of some of the things that have been added back in through the Tax Reform Act and some new benefits as well. So Congress has first of all restored 100% bonus depreciation. So that means that most business assets you can deduct 100% of the cost as deductible in year one, instead of depreciating those tangible assets over, or even intangible assets, over a significant period of time. That's second. We've also restored the full current tax deductions for U.S. R&D, or some people refer to as R&E, research and experimentation expenses, which has been much sought after by small businesses, big businesses, universities for their private investors, and so forth and so on. So these are both important restorations. In addition, we have had since about the middle of the last administration some very generous energy-related tax credits and deductions, and including the ability to sell some of those credits to other people for cash, which has typically not been possible for most tax credits in the United States. And so a good number of regulations came out about those regulations over the past couple of years, but most of those have been retained, except the big carve out is credits for wind and solar power electricity projects, as well as electric vehicles and charging equipment. Now, most people know about the car thing. That's been those credits, the car ones, have been knocked off as of September 30th. As you may know, there was quite a rush on buying electric passenger cars during that period, leading up to that. Not too fast yet here. Hold on, don't go too fast. So, but the bigger impact is going to be on wind and solar power projects, because those had very generous credits and deductions, and basically those are going to be phased out. Most of them are being phased out somewhere between now and the end of 2026 or 2028. Then another important area which has been very much expanded is the qualified opportunity zone benefits. Those have now been permanently renewed. And what happens is that you have new starting dates now, not going back just to the beginning of any period before 2026. Instead, any new investments in qualified opportunity zones, if you hold them for at least 10 years, you can resell them with no tax on the disposition. In addition, there are other benefits along the way, and some of those benefits have been increased to apply to rural qualified zones. So those have been less attractive to investors, I think, in some cases. Um, but there's a new set of rural QOZs being designated by the governors of the different states now. And so it would behoove folks who might be interested in developing facilities. We have somebody talking.
I mean,
Can we go mute Michael or whoever's talking? Okay.
I'm sorry.
So, yeah. So that's the last kind of main benefit to talk about is the qualified small business stock. Now, quite frankly, I was never all that excited about this, but it's been significantly expanded. It now includes corporations, the benefits of share sale proceeds, have now been expanded to include corporations with assets up to $75 million at the time the stock is issued. And you can sell off with excluded profits at the end of 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years. Or you can hold longer if you wish, and they'll still get the benefits. And the benefits can total up to $15 million for each U.S. individual citizen or legal resident or trust that owns those qualified small business stocks. Assets up to $75 million, that's not that small of a business. So it should have a major impact. And all these benefits, the qualifying figures and so forth are indexed for inflation. There are significant, before we go off let's go to the new benefits for individuals. So the 20% deduction from qualified business income, that's very important for owners basically particularly of LLCs that run smaller businesses, is now permanent. And that applies up to annual income of $75,000 or $150,000. That's essentially, you get a 20% deduction from the taxable income for the owners of that business. Probably the most significant single change in the individual area is the lifetime estate and gift tax exclusion. It was scheduled to be reduced, either eliminated or reduced from typically something, around somewhere around 10 to $12 million, running in the low 12, over 12 million per spouse now, or reduced down to like 5 million per spouse. And instead has been increased to $15 million for each individual citizen or legal domiciliary. In other words, $30 million of exclusion, lifetime exclusion per married couple. This amount is also indexed for inflation. So this really restores some of the major estate and gift tax planning that people can do during their lifetimes, and also in generation skipping arrangements. So this is a very important expansion, and probably will cause a number of people to go ahead and do what they were waiting. They were afraid maybe that they would try to do something and it would turn out to be not within the limits. But this has been made permanent. There are a number of other individual key provisions besides that one. There are basically some itemized deductions that have been taken out. Most miscellaneous itemized deductions have been taken out, but there's an overall cap so that you can deduct by these deductions up to 35% of your taxable income. Also, the SALT deduction cap, which is state and local tax deduction, which has been running at $10,000 per year for the last number of years since the first Trump administration. Now it's being increased to $40,000, which is helpful in people in high tax, income tax states. And it rises 1% annually over that number until 2029. But it is phased out for people with adjusted gross income over $500,000, $250 per person. So it will benefit a lot of people in high tax states because their taxes are quite high even at those numbers. But then, unless it's reinstated, that 40,000 or however much has become increased by inflation will be phased back down to the 10,000 limitation. There's also, perhaps well, many of us may know, some don't care, that there's now a seniors deduction. So folks age 65 or older, which includes me, can claim a $6,000 deduction per person. Um, if you have, if your couple doesn't have over $150,000 of income, then it phases back down. That's still, 6,000 is better than nothing. And there are also tax exempt distributions that can come out of the 529 plans. Now cover more education, elementary and secondary education, not just university level. I think we're covering most of those. Something to be noted about charitable deductions. The provision for that is a little bit cut back. Basically, if I go back here to my notes, let me see what I have over here. Beginning in 2026, the deduction for taxpayers itemizing is limited to contributions exceeding 0.5% of their adjusted gross income. So it has to be over that amount. Basically, most cash contributions will be taxable at 60% of the amount. So that cuts back a little bit, but not that much on those benefits. It should be noted that corporate charitable contributions will only be deductible if they're exceeding 1% of taxable income of the corporation, but they're capped at 10% of the corporation's income. So that may change some corporate giving plans. I haven't had time to see whether that's going to have that effect, but that will come in 2026. Okay, we're rushing along a bit. Oh, I want to mention one thing that is not in this notice and was not widely known, and I realized it was probably overlooked by most people, and that is that there is now going to be, as of 1/1/26, there's going to be a tax on remittances abroad. Any U.S. person remitting money abroad will have to withhold 1% of the amount. Now that, first of all, sounds like a pittance, but of course it could amount to a very large total for the country. But it's also, we're still not out of the individual provisions. But why this escaped notice is because the folks that are in charge of making sure it's withheld are the financial institutions that remit the funds. So, of course, people can remit without going through a financial institution. They may do something else. But if they do, they're responsible for the 1%. The financial institution will be responsible if they remit, and if they don't withhold it, and that for some reason the taxpayer wouldn't, and probably wouldn't because it's going out through the financial institution, doesn't have any power to withhold anything, the institution itself will have to pay the tax. Those don't come in until the beginning of 26, and for the first 3 quarters of 2026, there essentially will be some safe harbors established if you had reasonable cause not to withhold, and so forth and so on. Personally, I think this is if it were not being turned over to the financial institutions, this would be just a nightmare. You can't imagine how individuals would be able to withhold this amount, pay it into some government trust fund to collect these things. It would be a disaster. Does anybody have any questions about the Tax Reform Act? All these things I've been talking about? before I leave that? Okay. Um, all right. I want to talk about
That's
this.
like your 20 minutes.
Is up?
Yeah, I
No,
mean, and
no,
we
it's
didn't
not.
get to the
No, no, no.
global.
We started late. We started about
Okay, we were getting
about
close.
10
So,
after. Yeah, we're there. Here, I'll discuss it.
okay, perfect.
So you may know from my last alert back in April of 2024, and now this one, that the United States was very upset about the new provisions in the pending global tax reforms, which 104 countries have signed on to, that would allow a foreign country, in case a U.S. business, excuse me, whoever's got some sound there, could they turn the sound off? Hello? Can you mute your thing?
Maybe Michael?
Michael? No. Michael Alberts, are you?
Oh, I'm going to ask Michael. So,
You just have to mute the mic there, that's all. Yeah. In any event, if a U.S. business is not subject to a minimum tax on its global income of 15%, then another party to this global tax reform can impose a pickup tax on that company. Just assert the tax and it's payable. Doesn't have to have income in that country, doesn't have to have any jurisdiction over the US. It's just entitled to assert that tax. This conflicts with the US government's policies and also the Constitution, because when we pass legislation, tax legislation, it must originate in the House of Representatives. And when we pass, for example, deductions or credits that could pull down a effective tax rate down to below 15%, then this would open up that taxpayer to this provision, even though the Congress hasn't passed any tax. And in fact, this will reverse the effect, the desired economic effect of the tax incentives that the taxpayer is relying upon. So the U.S. in this Tax Reform Act had in the bill a provision called a revenge tax, in which it would impose on each country where a taxpayer asserted the right to collect such a tax from a U.S. taxpayer, would automatically impose a tax on all the taxpayers of that country doing business in the United States or holding assets here. Special tax. So this is a very draconian provision. And under this pressure, the G7 countries came forward and said, we know you're not a party to this agreement yet. We want you to be a party. But in order to induce you to do that, we will give you an exemption. We'll carve you out an exemption for you, the U.S., because you have a minimum tax system called previously called the GILTI tax system, which already applies or will apply to create a 15% minimum tax on global income for your taxpayers. So the U.S. said, well, if you'll get that provision taken out of the global tax agreement, we'll take this revenge tax out. So they said, we'll do it. We'll get it done. So we removed that provision from revenge tax from our bill. It's not there anymore. But it's conditioned on this change being made to this global tax agreement. So now that was only done, just around the time this bill was passed, around the early part of July. And so, unfortunately, a number of countries that are parties to this agreement are objecting to this being taken out, being inserted, I should say. In addition, a number of European Union tax experts, so-called, have said they don't think that would be lawful for this to be done, just by accepting out one country. So now the question is, are they going to try to do something that will have a similar exception for any country that has a substantially similar minimum tax, like our tax, that won't be subject to this global minimum tax? And you have 104 countries, not us, that have signed this agreement. So all of a sudden, the revenge tax is back on the table.
Requires that value must be supervised at all times. Any unintended value will be subject to compensation. Any unintended value should be.
Is there some way we can get rid of that?
I did. I unmuted. I mean, unmuted.
Okay. So that's now just come up in the last month or so. And it remains to be seen whether the snapback will occur, and this will come into effect in our law. It's already caused consternation in the merger and acquisition markets in Europe because countries there, where there are parties to these kinds of agreements, suddenly realize that their party or counterparty in the agreement may be subject to an additional tax after the deal closes. So they don't want to close without knowing how to cover that risk. And so the result is that we're now starting to have an economic impact in other countries with this uncertainty. Does anyone have any question about that or any comment on it? Okay, well,
I mean,
as
the only question is, John, I got my hand up, but is that, how long, we're going through a shutdown now. Now, how long is there any projection of how long this will continue on? And then I also just want to thank you because we are going to run out of time. So a quick answer and a quick, I want to go on to.
Yeah, we have an agenda.
Center.
We started a few minutes late, but
Okay.
I think we
We're
used up
about
that
at
time.
5:30.
Yeah, okay. So the answer is that it doesn't really depend upon the shutdown of the government. It's possible for legislation like this to move through the halls of Congress if it can be passed by the House and then taken up by the Senate and passed. The government does, the Congress doesn't shut down. The executive branch shuts down.
No, I know. I'm only comparing it to sort of there's a disruption in sort of this economic chaos that goes on globally at this point. But again, this is very interesting, a very much of a deep dive, John. And
I think
what's come into play. There's a lot of positive stuff that has come back into play on the tax structures. On the personal side, on the global side, just sounds like it's in chaos right now.
Yeah, this 2-pager is on the website for GPS, so you can go on.
Yeah, and feel free to follow up with you, right, John, as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because this is very, very interesting stuff. Much of it very positive.
Yeah, and actually at the bottom of that, I think that my contact information exists. I can't scroll down to it, but I believe there is a phone number and email number if you want to send an inquiry. Thanks for your patience, folks.